Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News. The inquiry into the treatment and outcomes of Innu youth in care began its second week with community meetings. Today it was the opportunity for people to share their personal experiences. Here's Angel Moore on the ground in Labrador.
I'm here in the Sheheshe First Nation, about 40 kilometers north of Happy Valley Goose Bay, where community meetings took place inside the youth centre. Two people talked about their personal stories while in provincial care, and their children who were also taken. They spoke about the abuse, neglect, and racism, and the intergenerational impacts. Notably, they spoke about the power and control provincial social workers had on the lives of this community, how kids were taken away for doubtful reasons, often because parents were just living in poverty. Commissioner James Igliorite says personal stories will help guide the recommendations.
What direction they can take in giving Innu child protection within their community. And eventually our recommendations will look at that aspect of it by doing things like we're doing today, hearing stories from individuals, their experiences, and what they've seen in the outcomes.
The goal is for Innu Child and Protection Services to be managed by the community. I'll be here all week as the inquiry continues. Angel Moore, APTN National News, Sheheshe First Nation.
Thanks, Angel. To Ottawa now, where a Senate committee continues to hear testimony about missing children and unmarked graves associated with residential schools. A major issue coming out of the committee is First Nations' lack of access to lands where possible graves are located. Here's Annette Francis with that story.
Kimberly Murray began by describing the many challenges and concerns in getting her job done, including accessing records, gaining access to private land, and protecting burial sites from development. Murray said legislative changes need to be put in place to hold developers accountable.
There's no legislation. We have legislation in provinces that tell developers if you find remains, you have to report that. That's too late. In my respectful opinion, it's too late when the shovels hit the bones of our ancestors. There has to be an earlier process to stop the development. We know that the laws, when those shovels hit the bones of our ancestors, and they don't report it to the coroner's office or the police, they rebury those bones and don't tell anyone. We have examples of that across the country. And then they get off, and they're not convicted, and they're not charged.
At a press conference later the same day, Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations Mark Miller was asked about communities that don't have access to possible graves on private or Crown lands.
A number of initiatives we can take: the outright purchase of the land and securing for the community in question. But in the face of an unwilling seller or one that is looking to perhaps extort or get really high value off a particular piece of land at the expense of people's emotions, and during a very difficult circumstances, we may have to take other measures in conjunction with the municipality or the province. But
Miller added he'll wait for Murray's report, although he said legislation to protect these sites isn't out of the question. Lawyer Donald Worm said that in addition to the federal government, provinces are complicating things by asserting sovereign rights.
But now we have little brother, the provincial governments, insisting in Saskatchewan and Alberta, for example, that they have sovereignty over the lands and resources. We have difficulty enough as it is accessing lands where the Indigenous children are buried under these presumed sovereignty.
According to Murray, she will have an interim report in June looking at the scope of possible unmarked graves across Canada and what to do about them. Annette Francis, APTN National News, Ottawa.
Public Safety Minister Marco Mendicino announced two new initiatives to support Indigenous and Black or racialized people in the criminal justice system. Currently, 32% of the total prison population are Indigenous, and 50% of the incarcerated female population are Indigenous. Mendicino announced a new call for proposals under what his government calls, quote, the Indigenous Community Corrections Initiative, with a commitment of over $5 million to support organizations that can offer culturally appropriate programming in federal institutions. Said the call for applications is open until May 24th.
It is clear to me that this does reduce some of the barriers that are baked into the system as a result of the hangover of colonialism. And so the idea behind this program is to inject more resources and capacity to expand those types of programs right across the country so that we can see the rates of recidivism or reoffending come down.
Still in Ottawa, Bill C-226 is meant to address the topic of environmental racism. An example would be Indigenous communities often facing the consequences of living in environmentally hazardous areas. Green Party co-leader Elizabeth May brought up the Curl oil sands tailings leak as to why the legislation is needed. It started 9 months ago, but local First Nations were not immediately notified. May said the Mikisew Cree and the Athabasca Chippewan are now on the front line of a hazardous situation.
Now Chief Alec Adam has had to tell all the people in the community, whatever you hunted and fished off the land over the last 9 months, you have to destroy it because it's not safe. This is a crime, and it comes under the category of environmental racism. And I'm calling on the federal government, Greens call on the federal government, on the Minister of Environment, Minister of Fisheries, throw the book at Imperial Oil. This is criminal activity, threatens the environment and human health, and you know it. Take action. Don't be satisfied with a slap on the wrist and a small fine.
Our reporters Danielle Parody and Chris Stewart are on the road to Northern Ontario to look into the effect of that tailings pond leak.
I'm Danielle Parody, heading to northern Alberta, where a toxic tailings pond spillover has revealed that arsenic and heavy metals have been leaking into the nearby watershed for 9 months. While politicians fight it out in Parliament, APTN will be on the ground in Fort Chipewyan for a community meeting between themselves and Imperial Oil. We'll be listening to community concerns. This story coming soon on APTN National News.
Welcome back. The embattled Thunder Bay Police Service will soon have a new chief of police. Today, the city's equally troubled Police Services Board, currently under the control of an administrator, named a replacement for Sylvie Hoth, who retired earlier this year while under suspension. Darcy Fleury, a 36-year veteran of the RCMP, was announced today as the new chief. Fleury is Red River Métis and currently the RCMP District Commander for Central Alberta. He joins me now to talk about the tall task ahead. Chief Designate Fleury, congrats on the new role.
Thank you very much.
Given all the well-documented issues over the years with the Thunder Bay Police Service, why was this a role that you even wanted to take on?
Well, you know, I've been watching it for some time, and you're right. There is some well-documented history there of negative impacts in the public. So I thought it was my skills and my knowledge and experience I've gained over the years I thought would be beneficial. And when I saw the advertisement for the position, I thought this was a great opportunity for me to take those skills and see if I can make a difference. So I decided to give it a try, and was very happy to be selected as the designate.
Well, what are you hoping to bring to the role?
Well, I think what I want to bring to the role is I'm very open and honest in my communication. So I believe building partnerships is going to be the key, one of the key priorities. Meeting with the community members, different organizations, different stakeholders, and really getting a strong understanding of what they want to see in their policing. So I think I'm open to that, and that's always been one of the key areas that I've worked on over the last few years is that community engagement. So I think that's going to be an important piece I bring to the role. I also believe that creating a learning environment within the organization so that everybody understands their roles and how we can attain much more better leadership by working together internally and working amongst ourselves to really develop people's skills as leaders. I think those are two things that I really could bring to the table.
For decades now, Indigenous peoples have had very little trust in the Thunder Bay Police Service. How do you think you could turn that around?
Well, I think one of the big things there is going to be that community engagement. My intentions are to, when I get there, to hit the ground running, to visit those communities, to understand where some of the long-rooted hard feelings are, and work together, like find solutions. I mean, there's always opportunity for better communication amongst all agencies and all groups, and so that's what I want to do from the very beginning, and maintain that. I want to have those relationships throughout my time there in Thunder Bay, and help develop people to understand that that's the important piece of what we do, is we serve the people, and everybody's included in that service, and I want to make sure that they're getting the best that we can to offer.
No doubt you're aware there have been calls from First Nations leadership and others to disband the Thunder Bay Police Service. What's your message to those people?
Well, I think those sentiments are out there, those feelings are out there, but I really want to get into the department, really get a feeling for how things are going, and I think again with my leadership style that I'm offering and bringing to the department, I think that hopefully somewhere down the road we can change some of those attitudes and have people believe that we can work together to really provide a fair, safe community. And I think that's going to be an overarching sort of goal for me to do.
Well, Chief Designate Fleury, we wish you well. Good luck with the new role, and appreciate you taking some time for us here today.
You bet. Thanks so much.
Find more on that story on our website, aptnnews.ca. The Bathurst caribou herd in the Northwest Territories is facing the fastest and deepest decline of all migratory barren ground herds. And Indigenous governments are taking matters into their own hands. Here's Charlotte Moore-Jacobs with more.
We kept sinking. Daniel Drybones recalls the time jerry cans saved his life while hunting on the land. And as a researcher, Irene Lafferty documents invaluable lessons like this from her community.
He fell in the water with his skidoos, and he had the 2 jerry cans tied up to the back of his skidoo. And he was wearing a lot of clothes, so he started sinking. And he just reached up to the rope that was tied up to the jerry cans, and he hung on to that rope. Names of places.
Lafferty is part of the Echo Traditional Knowledge Crew, a program operated by the Cleanshow government intended to promote safe and respectful harvests of caribou.
The older men would talk about the younger guys hunting. That's so different compared to when they used to go hunting. They would take their time, go slow, and get what they need to get and then return back. But the younger guys are faster, and sometimes they're not dressed warm. They forget something back in their vehicles.
Every March, eager hunters from across Denendeh make the trek up the Tibbet to Contoito Road in the Northwest Territories, hopeful to fill their freezers with caribou, a traditional staple no longer readily available back home. That's because the Bathurst herd is in free fall, from 500,000 in 1986 to just around a mere 6,000 in 2021, a decrease of more than 98%. Industrial development, climate change, increased predation, and modern hunting methods are just some of the suggested reasons for this decline. And while the territorial government has management actions in place, Cleanshow Nation is taking a lead role in conservation. APTN News first reported on the program where monitors took information from Cleanshow hunters on harvest health and numbers. But now the program has expanded to include researchers like Richard Rabiska, collecting data on what they see and hear in the field, including the impact the road has on all wildlife.
At night, you get the vehicles coming, and the lights blind them, and the noise.
He says more communication of data between wildlife co-management partners will help support the recovery of Bathurst caribou.
And the input on the ground should be more studied in You should get data from the miners and like the hunters.
While the herd may face challenges, hope is found in the power of collective traditional knowledge.
My whole existence of my cultures and everything was survival by caribou.
A lot of stories that I've collected, a lot of it is respecting the animals.
Charlotte Moore Jacobs, APTN National News, Contoito Winter Road.
An incident involving a respected cultural leader in Vancouver and a staff member at a hotel is prompting calls for a boycott. Here's Tina House with that story.
Leslie Barley is the executive director of the BC Association of Aboriginal Friendship Centres. She says that on Friday, February the 24th, their organization was having meetings at the Hyatt Hotel in downtown Vancouver when a disturbing incident involving a respected cultural leader and a staff member took place.
We had planned and had contracts to hold the Gathering Our Voices Indigenous Youth Conference there in a month's time, next week. And so we wanted to have our membership meeting there with our 25 friendship centers, and our cultural advisor, and our elders, and our provincial Aboriginal Youth Council, because we wanted to get to know the hotel. And we sure got to know it.
Farley says the incident happened after they had just finished dinner after a long day of meetings.
He has a medical condition, so when he has the urgency to go, he has to go. And the elevators were taking so long, so he ran up the escalators of the Hyatt into that conference level and went to use the washrooms there. And he was met at the door of the washroom by a staff person who appeared to have been closing up the washrooms for the night. And he said, "Let me by, please, I need to pee." And he asked 4 times to be let by to use the washroom. He said, "I'm a guest here." By this time he had already peed himself, and he was absolutely horrified and mortified. The staff person was smirking at him, and then finally let him pass and let our team member go into the washroom. Our team member was literally awake all night, mortified and horrified by what had just happened.
Varley says that the hotel did not properly address the situation.
By the time I got down to the hotel, they had provided our cultural advisor with a letter, and it said something like, "Thanks for your understanding. Our colleague was only doing his job. And here's a breakfast voucher, and we hope you have a pleasant rest of your stay." There was no breakfast voucher, not that that was an issue, but that's what they provided.
Grand Chief Stuart Phillip is also upset at what happened and says more needs to be done.
I think there should be some kind of a human rights action taken against the Hyatt. I think we should boycott the Hyatt. And serve notice on the hotel industry. We spend millions of dollars in the hotels here in Vancouver for our conferences, and that's the kind of treatment we get in return.
The Hyatt Regency Hotel has just recently provided another letter to the organization. In it, they state that they will be retaining a cultural advisor on Indigenous culture and issues affecting Indigenous people to train all our staff to understand the larger issue of systemic racism affecting Indigenous people. The BC Association of Friendship Centres has now cancelled their planned youth conference at the Hyatt, which would have brought in $2 million in revenue for the hotel. Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
APTN News reached out to the Hyatt Regency Vancouver but did not hear back. Red River Métis citizens facing homelessness now have a new place to call home. That story and more still to come. Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. While visiting the historic Forks in downtown Winnipeg, Jared Delorme was able to capture a close-up shot of a smudge for the spring equinox ceremony. We want to see your pictures. You can send them to share@aptn.ca. Now let's take a look at Wednesday's weather forecast. Starting on the East Coast, +6 for Halifax, sunny and 4 above in Fredericton. -11 and cloudy in Kuujjuaq, cloudy and 8 below for Nain. +3 in Montreal, snow and -1 in Val-d'Or. +4 with snow in Sault Ste. Marie and North Bay. In Northern Ontario, 3 above with snow in Thunder Bay, -2 and flurries in Sioux Lookout. 5 below with snow in God's Lake, Norway House and Thompson. -3 with snow in Winnipeg, 2 below and snow for Dauphin. -7 in Regina, 6 below for Saskatoon. 4 below in Meadow Lake, -6 in the Ronge. Further west now where things are much warmer, 5 above in High Level, Peace River and Grand Prairie. 7 above in Edmonton, sun's out and +8 in Lethbridge. 12 for Vancouver and Victoria. +9 and sunny in Prince George and Smithers. -9 in Old Crow, +3 in Whitehorse. -9 with snow in Yellowknife, 4 below in Norman Wells. -15 in Sax Harbor, 12 below in Pawlatuck. -25 for Baker Lake and Chesterfield. -21 in Resolute, 23 below in Clyde River. A new transitional housing program has officially opened to fight homelessness in Winnipeg.
We want them to avoid returning to homelessness. We want to increase employment abilities. We want a personal well-being.
The transitional housing program is part of the federal government's $12 million rapid housing initiative. The new facility also received $3.4 million from the city of Winnipeg. Our guest on tonight's new episode of Face to Face is actor, director, musician, and more. Renee Morso is back home in Treaty 1 to direct Rosanna Deerchild's first play, The Secret to Good Tea. Tonight, Morso talks about the role storytelling can play in reconciliation.
I think the very fact that we get to have the opportunity to tell our stories within a variety of genres, again, is not only a form of restitution and healing, but it's our form of reconciling with our past as Indigenous people within the Canadian system. And I think that art allows that to be present.
Secret to Good Tea opens this Thursday at the Manitoba Theatre Centre and runs until the middle of April. You can catch our entire interview with Renee right here in a little over a minute's time. Be sure to join us tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. That's when Daryl will be putting the significance of the spring equinox in focus. And of course, for much more on anything you've seen here, you can visit our website, aptnnews.ca. I'm Dennis Ward. Thanks for being with us. Have a great night.